Image copyright EPA. The UK is reaching the limits of what we can achieve in Brexit talks without moving on to talk about trade, David Davis has said. Updating MPs on Monday's dinner between Theresa May and EU officials, the Brexit secretary said progress was made but there was some way still to go. He urged EU leaders to give counterpart Michel Barnier the green light at this week's EU summit to begin trade talks. Mr. Barnier said he wanted to speed up talks but it takes two to accelerate. This was a reference to comments made by Mrs. May after her dinner with the EU's chief negotiator, in which she said the two sides had agreed on the need to accelerate the process. Speaking on Tuesday, Mr. Barnier said a constructive dynamic was needed over the next 2 months but there was a lot of work to do and issues must be tackled in the right order. At the moment we are still not yet at the first step, which is securing citizen rights, guaranteeing the long-term success of the Good Friday Agreement and finalizing the accounts, he said. The talks, which were held as EU member states prepare to assess progress so far on Thursday, were said to be constructive and friendly, but the UK's financial settlement with the EU continues to be a sticking point and the EU will not discuss trade until this has been settled. Along with the UK's divorce bill, the EU is insisting agreement be reached on citizens' rights and what happens on the Northern Ireland border before agreeing to open talks on the free trade deal Mrs. May's government wants to strike. Image copyright FBGT Images. Image caption. Mrs. May and Mr. Juncker embraced after their working dinner in Brussels last week. An internal draft document suggested the EU was going to begin preparing for the possibility of trade talks beginning in December, provided the UK does more to bridge the gap on the key negotiating points. In his Commons statement, Mr. Davis urged the EU to give Mr. Barnier a mandate to start discussing its future relations with the UK, including trade and defence, telling MPs he was ready to move the negotiations on. He suggested the UK was reaching the limits of what we can achieve without consideration of the future relationship. Our aim remains to provide as much certainty to business and citizens on both sides. To fully provide that certainty, we must be able to talk about the future. Right path on citizens' rights, he said. Key issues such as the rules on family reunion, the right to return, the onward movement of British expats in Europe and the right of EU residents to export benefits had still to be settled. Announcing that EU citizens who currently have permanent residence in the UK would not have to go through the full process of reapplying before Brexit, he said the UK had consistently gone further and provided more certainty on their status than the EU had done. While the UK had some way to secure the new partnership with the EU, he was confident we are on the right path. Speaking in the Commons earlier on Tuesday, Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson said he thought a reported bill of £100 billion was too high and urged the EU to get serious and agree to settle the citizens' rights question. Meanwhile, Home Secretary Amber Rudd has said the prospect of no deal with the EU is unthinkable, telling the Home Affairs Select Committee an agreement was so much in their interests as well as ours, in their communities, families, tourists' interests, to have something in place. For Labour, Shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer said EU and UK citizens were still no wiser over their future, while it appeared the deadlock over the financial settlement is such that the two sides are barely talking. Nobody should underestimate the seriousness of the situation we find ourselves in. At the first hurdle, the government has failed to hit a very important target. Get news from the BBC in your inbox each weekday morning.